You're tuning into the O&P Check-in, an SPS podcast. I'm Brendan Erickson, a regional sales manager at SPS. This show brings you the latest happenings in the O&P industry. We're unpacking trends and news from this tight-knit orthotics and prosthetics community. Co-hosting with me today is SPS Sales Account Manager of the Florida and Puerto Rico region, and my good friend, Stephen Hunter. Welcome, Hunter.
Hey, man. Glad to be here.
Absolutely, man. Let's get started. Are your patients fed up with holes in their prosthetic sleeve? Are they having trouble replacing them on a tight budget? Sleeve Saver understands. They have faced the same issues. That's why they developed a solution that protects your patient's sleeves from wear and tear, extending the life of the sleeve up to 5 times and saving your patients significant money. For more details, talk to your SPS Sales Account Manager or visit spsco.com today.
Now is the perfect time to earn CEUs before the hustle and bustle of the holiday season arrives. If you need to earn some CEU credits, click on over to SPS University. With over 15 courses, choose from topics ranging from microprocessor feet and knees to AFOs and KAFOs, and more. Open an SPS University account today by selecting the Resources tab on spsco.com to get started.
Hello, listeners. Today we have 2 very special guests from O&P Insight, Vice President and General Manager Lesleigh Sisson and Senior Manager of Clinical Affairs Curt Bertram. They're here to discuss and share current trends shaping the industry. Welcome, Lesleigh and Curt.
Thanks, Brendan. It's great to be here.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And welcome back, Lesleigh, a multi-attendee here on our podcast, and you're always well received. So that's awesome. And I'm super excited, and we're really happy that you're joining us today. And not only that, we're excited O&P Insight is joining the Hanger family.
Well, we are very excited to join the Hanger family, and we are thrilled that Hanger and Pete Stoy in particular saw our value in the O&P space and the investment that they're making in independent practices by allowing us to continue our work with independent practices and businesses in the O&P profession.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Your team has such a wealth of experience and expertise, which I believe, why we're so thrilled to have you on the podcast for a second time. And to kick off the interview, one trend that is top of mind for many of our listeners is reimbursement. Could you start us off by sharing how Medicare policy shaped the O&P market and how has O&P influenced policy?
Medicare policy has always shaped all healthcare and O&P in particular, but especially starting in 2011 when the OIG report about aberrant billing practices of lower limb prostheses came out, which then influenced the first Dear Physician letter regarding prostheses. And then the RAC audits happened in 2012, which really, in my opinion, rocked the O&P world because we had never been held accountable before for physician medical records relating to the claims that we billed. And before that, we as an industry or profession always thought that the detailed written order along with our records was sufficient enough for a medical record to justify prosthetic and orthotic devices. And that's when the world really changed for us. And we had to have medical records from the ordering physician to corroborate the claim that we sent to Medicare.
It did start really rocking our world, as you said, Lesleigh, back in 2011, 2012 with the RAC audits and physician documentation. And another issue that came up back in April of 2022 was the upper limb prosthetic coding advisory article that came out as a joint article from the DME Max and the PDAC. And this really hit our industry pretty hard. As we all know, there's no upper limb LCD or policy article. So this was intended to be a correct coding guidance article that sort of mirrored, if you will, lower limb prosthetics. But as we analyze this as a profession and as our associations, the O&P Alliance, the Academy, AOPA, NAAOP, they all looked at this and said, oh, this is not what we really wanted. And the DME Max and the PDAC are charged with correct coding task and providing that to our industry. But when we looked at it, we thought, well, this is going to be very unfortunate for upper limb amputees, specifically those that have partial hand amputations. So our associations got together and they rebutted this policy article, provided a lot of evidence and comments, and it took until about March of 2023, but that was finally retired. The unfortunate legacy is that some private payers, some commercial payers may adopt some of this language into their policies moving forward or use it as a way to deny certain claims. But the good news is our defense is that this article was retired by CMS. So as we move forward, not only does CMS and Medicare shape what we do through this type of action, we actually have a voice, and through our associations, we can rebut this type of perceived negative impact on our industry to be able to retain the ability to provide quality care to our patients. Most recently, which everybody's really talking about, the big buzz, is that the new LCD for lower limb prosthetics hit the market, if you will, hit the O&P industry and allowed for patients diagnosed with functional classification level K2 to get microprocessor and K3 knee technology. Also, Medicare has codified the definition of a brace and solidified the ruling on 3D printing, allowing 3D printing to be considered custom fabrication for orthotics. They have provided approval and codes for powered exoskeletal systems and recognized new coding at a pace we haven't seen recently. And one of those examples is the Click Medical Mechanical Volume Adjustment Code 5783. So we're seeing that Medicare, the HCPCS work group, is really moving forward and recognizing technology, which we've been lacking for years. And now we're seeing this trend. So it is quite exciting.
And our O&P community has really influenced that. So whether it's Dr. Canterberg and all of the work that Autobot did on the K2 LCD, as well as Click Medical taking their device to the HCPCS work group to get a new code, Myomo and Rewalk, and the C-Brace. And, there has been so much that our profession has done to move forward Medicare's policy. And we're very glad that Medicare and CMS and the decision makers there are embracing technology and new HCPCS.
I think the future looks bright.
Yeah, so they rocked our world in 2011, but now it's kind of turning around and rocking in a good way.
It is. And although everything that happened in 2011 and 12 wasn't comfortable for us, it really did force us to do a better job at clinical documentation and justifying why we bill the claims that we do. So even though it hasn't been fun, it has really propelled us forward in our profession.
What trends are you seeing in the O&P industry regarding digital workflow and automation? Any adoption issues or obstacles, things like that?
Over the years, I think as an industry, we've struggled with digital workflow on the clinical side of things. And we've had a lack of early adopters. And I think one of the reasons that's significant is, Lesleigh and I were talking just recently about how we in our industry stick to old paradigms with regards to fabrication because it's a known quantity. We know what we know. It's easy for us, efficient for us. The costs are known to create, let's just say an example of a solid ankle AFO. I can cast the patient, fill the plaster cast, modify it, pull the plastic, get it done same day, work over the weekend, and I'm 100% in control of it. Now, when I go to digital workflow, I have to learn new technology. I have a certain expenditure with cost of goods and a capital expenditure in the equipment. I have to either learn how to modify it myself or rely on a central location that's going to modify and rectify my cast. And then typically I'm relying on a central fabrication facility to produce it. And then I have to wait and get that back and have the out-of-box experience in opening up that product. So we know what we know, and we tend to be comfortable with that because we can control so many factors. When it comes to early adoption into, let's say, 3D printing and technology, we have to learn, spend money, and trust and develop those relationships and those partners that are going to allow us to adopt that new technology.
Yeah, change is hard, but having a good partner through that, I think, is a huge, huge advantage.
What we're seeing in the industry now is more adoption to digital workflow. And the reason being is it makes us very efficient, but the ultimate thing is it allows us to see more patients. And when we see more patients, we can take care of our communities better.
The other thing I think, in addition to certainly seeing more patients and supporting our community, across the nation, we are seeing the lack of clinicians. We have clients that come to us and say, hey, do you know of anybody that wants to move to our area? Or do you know of anybody that would like to take on an expanded role in management? We just find that we're not recruiters, but we find that we're being asked those questions all the time. So if we have the ability in digital workflow and technology to be more efficient and see more patients, and also maybe involve care extenders or assistants in this area, that we will be able to meet the demand that we're seeing in the profession nationwide. I'm married to a clinician, and I laugh and say I also gave birth to one. And these are areas that they are seeing as well, that their schedules are full, and being able to use technology in order to fabricate, I think, will benefit everybody.
How about some of the time saving through technology on more of your day-to-day documentation work and admin work? Are people entering into the space and accepting technology in that realm?
I think at times they are. We find when we start working with clients and look at their EHR systems that they don't know how to use everything, and they don't even know some of the features that are there. In addition, we need to build in more automation and more efficiency, whether they're AI tools to scrub some of the documentation that we look at so that we're not missing things. So I absolutely believe that people need to learn how to use what they have now, whether it's their EHR system, their clearinghouse, auto payment posting, some other features that they may not know that are already in their system, but also working with their EHR systems to add additional features to make it easier, whether that's AI, the clinical documentation. I know that several of the EHRs are working on AI and templates and some other things, but we still need to ensure that it's very patient specific and not just rote documentation where you can't tell the difference from claim to claim or insured to insured.
We often talk about to clinicians about the bane of their existence, and it's the number of clicks and the number of hours they spend doing their documentation for their patients. And this is where AI, I think, is something that will have a lot of early adopters once we get to the point where we can roll these systems out. Because AI is not just the dictation anymore. It is not just creating documentation as you say it. It's interpreting it. It is going out and looking at other resources and information to synthesize a proper, if you will, SOAP note or a proper clinical documentation. It was interesting. I did a test with AI, and to show some of its power, I was being the patient. The interviewer asked me, it said, hey, Curt, do you like rainbows and unicorns? And I said, of course, who doesn't like rainbow and unicorns? But when it came to create the SOAP note and the clinical documentation, it didn't mention anything that I liked rainbows and unicorns, because that's not relevant to the situation that we were involved in. So those types of things will start to produce more efficiency, save clinician time, and create better outcomes so that clinicians can focus more on their patients and not as necessarily on creating that documentation. They'll have to edit it, and as Lesleigh said, still know the policies and make sure it's appropriate, but it will certainly be a game changer.
I think it also gives you kind of like a little helpful nudge in areas, because we all make mistakes and we may forget one little facet of presentation or something. And if it knows that needs to be in there, it could nudge you in the right direction. I also wanted to bring up, we did a podcast on gait analysis and video gait analysis, and how awesome it is to be able to go back and look at what you've done and see it for a second time with a second set of eyes and review things you may have missed, or ideas may pop up that at that time you just didn't, have at the forefront of your mind. And it's just so cool. I feel like it's almost like how sports grew astronomically when they started using technology and analytics and video. And now you're lost if you don't do that in the sports world. And I think it's the same in our world. It's really cool.
It is. And I think where it can go to ensure that we're getting things ordered or fabricated in time. Because what if in Curt's note, he said, Mr. Jones needs 6 new socks and 2 new liners. and he forgets to order them. Wouldn't it be great if it reminded him 3 days later and say, hey, we noticed that you didn't put these in the cart. Did you still want to order these for your patient? I don't know if that technology is out there. I'm sure it's out there. That, wow, wouldn't that be great for us to use it in O&P? Because they're busy. They're going from room to room. They're fabricating. If they're managing people, they're managing patients. And those reminders in the AI, or, hey, you didn't make a plan. You gave us the subjective and objective, but what about your assessment and your plan? You need to finish that. Those reminders, Curt and I often talk about, though, technology is great, but if you don't know the basics, if you don't know how to write a really good SOAP note, you shouldn't move on to AI. You need to know the basics before you can move on.
I feel like you almost need to adopt some of this, like these trends and changes towards a digital workflow to stay competitive in today's like business and clinical world. But that's such a kind of profound leap over just a simple dictation. Like Curt said, it's almost like an assistant there to remind you for things that you forgot. And that's a huge, huge help.
I had a career before O&P. I was an engineer, and I was at the top of my profession when it came to computer programming and the current workflow. And that, I hate to admit that was back in the late 80s. And then I got into O&P, and I jumped back into, some computer work, and it went by me. And there is so much I lost in 10 years just being an O&P, learning how to make orthotics and prosthetics and see patients, because that's what I was focusing on. The same is going to happen in O&P. So the people that are laggards and not early adopters may find themselves literally behind the curve. And technology is where this profession, where we're going to save this profession. Through digital workflow, through automation, it's going to create those efficiencies against the eroding margins that we've had to be able to be viable in the O&P space. Technology's here, and we need to adopt it, and we need to be part of it to be able to, in my humble opinion, save this profession.
Technology in general is almost advancing so much that if you're not an early adopter, you're going to immediately be behind.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, and you guys talk about eroding margins and workflow. Let's switch gears a little bit into how you get demand for your practice. And one thing that we always get asked out there is, what's going on with contracting? Can you give us some updates on what you're seeing in the world of contracting and how to, successfully achieve, kind of the demand for your business?
One of the top 3 questions that we get, usually the number one is, how can we get doctors to write what we need them to write in the medical record? But a really close second is, how do we get increased reimbursement? My rates are terrible. How do I get them to up my rates? Or how do I get the contracts that I need? I don't have the big contracts. How do I get those contracts? Curt and I, we started our career 30 something years ago in the same place in Phoenix. When we started, the lowest payer that we had was Medicare. Everything was Medicare plus. Most of the rest of healthcare is Medicare plus, not Medicare minus. O&P is Medicare minus, and sometimes Medicare minus a lot with some of these private payers and Medicare Advantage plans and things like that. I wish that I had a really good formula to get that done. I don't. I do know that if you just ask, that sometimes you'll get what you ask for. And especially if you can come in with any data. If you have any data of the code that you bill, the outcomes that you have, going in with data and saying, this is why this is unsustainable for us. I can give you an example. When we owned our practice here in Las Vegas, I went to one of our regional payers and I said, you guys locked in our rates back in 2017 at Medicare minus at that time. And it's just not sustainable for us. And this was my ask. I said here. And so it took them a couple months. They actually didn't come back to me and hey, well, what about this? Or give me more information. But they came back and they increased our rates significantly going forward. And that it will stay up with the current Medicare fee schedule and not be stuck 7 or 8 years ago. So first of all, asking, figure out what your ask is. What do you want out of that insurance company? What's the ask? And what are you going to give them? Can it be a give and take? Certainly looking at your data, what are you typically billing them? What are the reimbursement rates on those from that insurance company? What are the reimbursement rates from other contracts that you have? Working with individuals like us, but also Mosen Solutions, they have a great relationship with After Transparency. One thing that we find often is people will say, hey, I need help with my contracts, or I need help with a reimbursement on a particular claim. And we need to look at their contract, and they don't know where their contracts are. So first of all, my first advice is locate all your contracts. If you don't have copies of them, go to your insurance companies, ask them for their copy, make sure that it's fully executed, meaning you have your owner's signature and you have their representative signature, and that you digitize all of those, that you have it not only on your computer, but you have it saved somewhere in the cloud that is secure, or on a hard drive that is not on your computer that you can put in a safe, so that you have all of that. I like to save it actually in 3 places. I like to save it on my computer. I like to save it in my secure cloud-based program. And I have them on a external hard drive that is in my fireproof safe. So I know I can always get them. And I still like to have paper copies, because I like to be able to put notes or stickies, or we did this. I usually don't say anything about I like paper copies of anything, but contracts I do like paper copies of. And then if they get updated, then I move that into an archive so I can always go find it if I need to. So that's the number one thing about contracts, is know what your contracts say and be able to find them. I also like putting them in a database. So here are my 16 contracts that I have. This is what the reimbursement is. This is how it should change every year. Who do I contact? When is the expiration date of it? When was it originally signed? And where can I locate the actual contract? So that's where they need to start. And then they need to start looking at data. What does their EHR system say? What claims are they billing to them? What kind of reimbursement? How many days does it take them to get reimbursed? What is that information? So that's the basics of where to start. And then you can start negotiating from there. And who should you be negotiating with? Typically calling member services, just the provider line is not going to get you anywhere. You need to know who your contracting and credentialing person is for your contract. Caveat to that and caution is they change often. I don't know if it's a stressful role. I would imagine it is. So they do change often. So make sure that you're keeping up to date and that you're keeping past emails with those folks so that you know who to contact. Keeping that information of those contact people also in your database that you keep on your contracts, keeping their email address, their phone numbers, any information that you can get on them. So if you ever have a problem, you can go back and research that and don't have to search through your emails. If you don't know who to contact, look on LinkedIn. Find out who the people that handle their contracting, credentialing, their provider relations. So try to find somebody there. See if you can connect there. Ask your colleagues. A lot of us work with the same. So it helps us to help each other in this area. As Mitch Dobson at Hanger says, a high tide lifts all ships. I've heard him say that many times. And I believe that if we can, without antitrust or talking about fees and things like that, but if we can help one another in this area is really important. Curt, you have anything to add?
We talked about how CMS is recognizing new technology with new codes and new fee schedules. Well, it's really interesting if you're on top of your contracts, like Lesleigh suggests, and as part of your performance management that you do on a routine basis, required by your accreditation, is that when these new codes hit, you make sure that before you submit them to your payer, that they recognize them. So CMS may come out and say, oh, here's a new code, here's a new fee schedule, but some of the commercial payers, some of the Medicaid, some of the MCOs, they're going to lag behind. And when will they adopt that new L code and that new fee schedule? Well, it could be a to be determined, but you're going to want to make sure that you're on top of that. And that's part of you working your contracts on a regular basis. Some of us are, when we start a business, we're so happy to get a contract. Yay, and we put it in the drawer and we forget about it. And 5 years later, we realized the contract had not a prevailing Medicare fee schedule, but a 2020 fee schedule. Well, we've had a lot of increases since then, and you just lost out on all of those. So keeping on top of your contracts, it should be something akin to attending AOPA in the academy on the clinical side and on the outcome side to make sure that you're at the top of your profession there. But on the administrative side, on the business ownership side, you need to stay on top of your contracts as well.
Yeah, keeping up with those relationships is as important as your relationships with your patients and your manufacturers and your distributors, if not more.
100%.
We've seen it with manufacturers and vendors and clinics, but O&P consolidation, good, bad, ugly, indifferent? What do you guys think?
we've talked about this quite a bit lately, as you can imagine. I think it's about perception. It's really about your perception individually as a company. I personally think the collaboration, whether it's consolidation, whether it's mergers, whether it's, companies coming together, I think is a good thing for the most part. As long as they strive to be as compliant as they can, that they strive to really benefit our O&P profession as a whole, I think that it's good. Certainly people are going to say, oh, that's bad. Or certainly we've had some comments over the last couple of weeks and people not understanding about the acquisition of O&P Insight. But I want to reiterate for us that we remain with our same vision to help O&P businesses thrive. One of the questions that we got asked on the town hall last week was, is Hanger our only customer now? Is Hanger Clinic our only customer? And Hanger is not one. Clinic is not one of our clients at all. We remain in business and for independent practices and for manufacturers as well. We work with a number of distributors and manufacturers, helping them with their reimbursement strategies as well. As the overall O&P, this is nothing new. This is happening in all segments of healthcare and in all segments really of business.
Consolidation is happening across all industries. And we're seeing it transcend healthcare, obviously. And I want to bring up something in the past about consolidation and companies getting larger. When companies get larger, they can leverage resources. And back to the RAC audits, Hanger Clinic stepped forward and was able to help the industry and provide RAC assistance to everybody and made it a public domain response. And what was interesting about that is that the independents and the smaller facilities may not have the time or expertise to do that. So this is where consolidation and having larger companies can benefit the industry. And that is as one example. But whether it's expanding products and services or whether it's vertically integrated, we're in that environment. And we're in that environment on a national level with all industries.
And as I look back on my career, I explained this to our staff a few weeks ago, that the first 8 years of my career, so from 90 to 2000, I went through 3 acquisitions. So I worked for 4 different companies through acquisition. And then in the early 2010-ish, my husband and I purchased a practice. I started O&P Insight. We purchased another practice. We sold one of the practices. And now O&P Insight has been acquired by Hanger. So I have a lot of experience in acquisition, and it's not new. My first acquisition happened 30 years ago. This is not new to O&P.
Well, and I'd like to say, we've talked about, various subjects here, and you guys have given a ton of expertise through your experience. And I don't know if we actually said it, but O&P Insight, your vision, like you said, is to help O&P facilities thrive. And your core goal is to provide consultation. And in anything that we've talked about today, you guys provide that service. And I don't want that to be lost on people because that is your goal. And anything that you guys heard, I'm talking to the listeners now, anything that you guys heard today, if it sparked an interest, Curt and Lesleigh and their entire team are the ones to just even have a discussion with and learn how they can help consult and improve and help your practice thrive. So I just wanted to throw that in there because we didn't really say that yet.
Brendan, I'm glad you mentioned that. Just before the recording for this podcast, I had a colleague reach out to me that I worked with at another facility prior to O&P Insight. And she said to me, I want to start my own practice. And I'm like, that's fantastic. Well, have you thought about where you're going to do it? And I asked her a whole bunch of questions. And she goes, I don't know any of that. And I said, well, you made the right phone call because we're going to help you start your own practice. She goes, I was told that you were going to do that for me by other colleagues that we've helped previously. So it was a word of mouth that finally came down to a phone call. And I'm so grateful that she reached out. And we're going to have a lot of fun getting her up and running in her new practice this year.
And that's a great point, Curt. We have helped more people expand their practices, meaning open new locations, buy practices, and start practices than we have had people get acquired. So I think people need to understand that we are still a growing profession and the independent market is growing. Certainly, there's been a lot of focus on acquisitions. However, we personally in our consultancy have seen more on the other side of growing the independents rather than being acquired by larger companies. And they're both good. I really think they're both good. And it's about what's your why? Why do you want to start a practice? Why do you want to stay in independent practice? Why do you want to sell? My husband and I had to go through that. And part of it was the legacy for our son and the fact that he worked with us, and what better opportunity does he have in partnering with a larger company, staying independent? He was part of that decision-making process. So it's about what your why is. Many practitioners they want to own their own business because they do want to be independent, but they get farther along down the road and all of the constraints and the requirements from all different business entities and federal, state entities can become overwhelming, and they just want to practice. So I think that's part of it as well.
And we routinely have discussions with the independents about succession planning. So have you been running a lifestyle business? And there's nothing wrong with running a lifestyle business. But if you have nobody in your family that you're going to pass along that legacy to, and you want to be acquired, and that's a legitimate ask and desire, and then what do you need to do in order to get your business ready for being acquired? And so we routinely have conversations with clients about what it takes to get your business ready for acquisition.
Well, all this has been really amazing. And just even through networking and speaking with independents, anybody can glean a ton of information from you two and your entire team. One thing I would like you guys to just kind of expand upon is you guys have an annual education and networking event, and it's coming up. Can you tell us a little bit about Lead the Way?
Absolutely. So Lead the Way the first one was supposed to happen in April of 2020. We all know what happened then. So we postponed it, and the first one was in November of 2021, and we're about to have our third annual Lead the Way, which is geared towards independent practice business owners and managers to come learn about people and technology and how to develop a business plan and succession planning. So we have a lot of great speakers, some wonderful sponsors. SPS is one of those. And we are really excited to welcome everybody to Las Vegas, October 10th and 11th.
Yeah, I've heard tremendous things about the event, and people that go say that not only the content that they receive is second to none, but just the relationships that they, grow and see, come to fruition from original meetings there is just huge and super helpful. So thank you guys for, A, coming on the show, B, providing all the services that you do, and C, for the future help you're going to provide a lot of the people that hopefully knock on your door.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your support and for allowing us to come share our knowledge today.
It was great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Lesleigh and Curt. To learn more about O&P Insight, follow the link in our show notes.
Thank you for listening to the O&P Check-in, an SPS podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, be sure to leave a review and subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Have a question or topic suggestion? Email us at spspodcast@spsco.com. See you next time.